Thank you for being with us and for taking the time. I don't think that you need much introduction other than everyone. This is our mayor, Ron Nuremberg. And I think at the last intersection, I had promised to have some intro music for him from the boss. And because he is the boss. So I'm sorry, I'll make it happen next time, Mayor. But thank you for being with us this morning. And it's just good to have you here and to be able to talk about compassion and community with us. So thank you for doing that.
Well, good morning, and it's great to see everybody here as well. And I know this isn't exactly how we wanted to start another year, but I can't think of a better way to start a new year than to be at the intersection, even if it is virtually. So great to be with you, and just an incredible story along with the last difficult couple of years to be able to see the progress of Compassion San Antonio through the intersection that's come together at a very, very critical time. So thank you for the invitation, and great to join you this morning, Ann.
Oh, well, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing without your leadership. So thank you. I know too that given our current context where we are at the beginning of this year, that your top 3 community concerns are community health, education, workforce, and housing. I think it's really interesting that you've defined that by community health. Could you define for us what you mean by community health? It's interesting that you're not specifically saying public or mental health, but you're saying community health. Tell us more.
Yeah, and I think that's intentional, because I think that community health means so many different things. And prior to probably the last 5 years or so, when we talked about health and healthcare, a lot of people left out mental health. We were really talking about physical health. And so we've taken measures into helping people understand that healthcare also includes mental health. And public health as a concept, as a focus for the city, involves a lot of different aspects of policymaking, including how we define our health metrics, how we define our success, what kind of needles we're trying to move in terms of overall better outcomes for families. And that's why I think it's in my opinion, we talk about what are the 3 areas of focus, why it's important to use the word community as opposed to just public health, which is more associated with those metrics and sort of a policymaking lens. In my opinion, community health is inclusive of all those things and is inclusive of wellness, which I think has everything to do with the intersection that we're talking about here. People's spiritual and emotional well-being, in addition to mental health and physical health, all coming together to create what we experience as community, in a community, a sense of community through that focus on the whole person, the whole neighborhood, the whole city, the whole community. So when we think about it, this is something that we're still learning, we're still working through. And in fact, I would challenge anyone who would suggest that we had a proper focus on health at all before the pandemic, but now that we do have a more sharpened approach to what we're trying to achieve as policymakers, in some ways because of the pandemic, that we broaden our perspective of what it means to be well, what it means to have community or public health, and that's why I think it's important for us to, the phraseology and the terminologies are very important.
And I resonate with that as well. In fact, I think about community health to also how we live and work together. So in that wellness, how do we build our capacity as community, and how we can become more resilient in that and more collaborative, how we can get smarter together, and how we can, lean into each other more in terms of our care.
I 100% agree. And that is where the term and the actions that we take to be a compassionate community come in, where we work together to resolve conflict, how we resolve conflict, the work that's taking place right now between, you know, our health department and our public safety departments, for instance, and trying to find ways that we can arrive at more restorative justice solutions in some of the work that we've been doing for decades and decades. I think is all part of that wellness perspective, and that's why I agree with you. I think it's about community, and it's about you know, much more than what we typically think about as public health metrics and how we view progress in that area.
It makes me think too, you know, you and I have both taken compassionate integrity training, and it works. I'm trying to translate here, but it works at the individual uh, and then other and then systemic levels. So, for example, you know, I need to learn how to be compassionate with myself and practice those skills, and then how to be compassionate then with others, and then to be able to look at the systems I'm involved in, like my family system, and to be able to look at that um, to see where it needs to be tweaked and to become more compassionate. And so thinking about it that way, I can see, you know, you the first thing you did when you went into office was to sign the resolution to become a compassionate city. But it can't just start there, right? It
Right.
starts, you know, with each of us, and then it can build in community, and then a compassionate community and compassionate communities. That's what builds a compassionate city, you know.
I, it starts with you. It starts with me. Um, there are so many there are so many wonderful songs that are about this concept, where it starts with the man in the mirror. But I had this motto, still loosely have it in my office, and it cuts to the essence of compassion. It's about the principle of reciprocity, the golden rule, which is as close to you know, the individual and a, a relationship as you can get, in my opinion. When you think about how you treat other people, as you treat other people as you want to be treated, you don't treat other people the way you don't want to be treated. But the motto that we've always used is be a better neighbor. And in my opinion, you know, what
Mm,
we lack in our civic dialogue, what we lack in, you know, politics, is the ability for people of different backgrounds and faiths and beliefs and political ideologies to um, talk with one another and to understand each other, or even take an effort to get to know each other. And so we've always had the view that you know, neighborhoods are stronger when the neighbors know each other. And so we've said, be a better neighbor. Know who's across the street from you. Know who's next door to you. And in many cases, we don't. But if we can do that in our own neighborhood, we'll be a much stronger, more collaborative neighborhood. And think about that. If we can do that across the city, how much stronger and more collaborative of a city we could be. That principle holds true from state to state, from nation to nation. And to me, the idea of being a better neighbor is as much to do with international policy and politics as it does with, you know, having a stronger and safer street in your neighborhood.
mhm. In fact, they like depend on each other, you know? I mean,
Absolutely.
one impacts the other. They depend on each other. You know, it
It,
makes me think too of examples, kind of recent examples. In fact, we're going to be hearing examples at every briefing today, but I think of last August, the collaborative that formed about Afghan refugee response. I know you were at the walk in early December, but also our equity budget. That's like a decision of policy and process. Did you want to
you
say
know,
anything about those?
I do, and I do want to point out though that this is something that's innate in human beings. This idea, this principle, this way of life, that somehow through life and politics, you know, the world, the reality, and politics, it gets eroded or gets hidden. But we know this. And this is why when the pandemic initially started, you remember the phrase that we always used. And it wasn't that we made it up on the spot. It's that we were so, everything was cut down to its core. It's broken down its foundation. We got to the essence of everything, making sure that people had a roof over their head, making sure that people were able to feed their families. We said that we were all in this together. And when all those things came crumbling down, all the systems that make life complicated come crumbling down, we see the essence of things. And the essence was, we're all in this together. And so, moments like the walk a couple of weeks ago with our refugee neighbors from Afghanistan are important because, you know, we demonstrate the essence of what it is to be a human being, which is to be compassionate for our neighbors in need. When we do things like the equity budget, we're reducing, in some ways, simplifying our policymaking, the system of government resource allocation to its essence, which is that we should provide resources where they're most needed, where they're needed the most, and we should make sure that we're addressing the systemic or historic inequities that have resulted in people, having fewer opportunities to go to get a quality education or get a living wage job. We should address those inequities by how we allocate our public resources. So the equity budget, the walk with our neighbors, the Afghan refugees, and even the words that we used when we were broken down to our very foundation during the pandemic, we're all in this together, all come from the same essence of what it is to be a human being, and that is compassion. And I do appreciate, and that you recognize by intention, my first document to sign as mayor in 2017 was the city's Charter for Compassion. We didn't create a compassionate city by signing the document. We recognized that was the essence of San Antonio. It was here before. We have to call it out, and we have to continue to work towards demonstrating that.
Mm-hmm. And part of that process too is being able to look at the system strongly and compassionately to see how to shift things so that we might become more compassionate. I went to a conference a couple of years ago that was on compassion and healthcare. And one of the most important takeaways I got from that was to be hard on systems and soft on people, but that we're strong enough to be able to look at a system, knowing that it's made up of people, but to be able to compassionately hold the systems accountable, to be able to compassionately look at ourselves and what that might mean, but to be able to be more clear and transparent. So I thought maybe we could practice that at the very end here. And I'll go first, so you have a little bit of time to think about it, Mara, before you speak. But over these almost 100 weeks of meeting at the intersection and listening carefully to our faith and community leaders, there are two things that come to mind that I think on behalf of them, I will encourage and challenge you to carry forward to your other colleagues and civic leaders. And then maybe you can respond back courageously to encourage faith leaders and community leaders and to challenge us as well. So the two things that I have heard underlying, frankly, all of our community concerns, but how we work together as a system, right? So one thing that I've clearly heard from those intersections is to have the city and the county work even more in partnership. And that might even, we've seen a lot of that in terms of funding that's available in terms of recovery in the pandemic. Instead of having, separate conversations about how things are happening. And I know that you and the judge meet regularly, but what I'm hearing from folks is really to, put together, say, like mental health efforts, city, county, and make that such a stronger partnership instead of duplication. So that's one thing I've clearly heard, to work even more integratively between the city and county. And the other one is actually about the civic process and community input. We have, the city does its best with, adult forums. Um, we've had quite a few of those in the last couple months in terms of bonds, but also some of the funding that's now available. But I hear from within the community that those aren't very effective, those listening times, that it could be maybe organized better. And who better to maybe teach the city and the civic leadership, but community? How does community talk to each other? And how can we get deeper into those conversations? People can find them frustrating and sometimes divisive. I know you've been to them, and you know what that feels like. So I think those are the two things underlying lots of our conversations that our civic leadership could be stronger at. And I'm encouraging you because that's what I've heard. Now, what do you hear from your civic colleagues? And how can you encourage and challenge the faith and community leaders that are listening today?
That's a tough one. And I certainly hear and appreciate and agree with the sentiments before about, our works and our two great works in progress. How can we work better together, and how can we listen to each other better and demonstrate that? And those will always be works in progress. And I think rightfully so. I think for me, and what I hear in terms of our our jurisdictions, our constituencies, and how we can do things differently or better, are that we continually build silos. Even when we're tearing down silos, we're building up new silos.
Mm.
And that's true inside politics, that's true outside of politics, that's true with community organizations. And similar to the challenge of getting to know your neighbor, I think people are there is a, I think, an innate um, desire, maybe, or instinct to congregate with people who are like you. And that's also a work in progress for us to continue to break down those barriers. And that's the challenge with our systems, I believe, is that systems invariably are created by and run by human beings, actual people with thoughts and feelings and emotions and all that. But systems are also invariably bureaucratic. And once you create a system, you are constantly pushing back against the system's tendency to create its own life and to operate on its own. In fact, that's what it does. You create bylaws, you create structure, and the system kind of continues to go forward with or without the human beings and the emotion and the thoughts and the desires that we all have to do better. So, in my opinion, what we have to do is figure out exactly what you're doing today, which is where are the intersections between our constituencies? Where does, how can the faith community speak to the work that we're doing in City Hall in a way that encourages people who are not engaged to get engaged, to learn more about it? We have specific issues that we're, really struggling with all across the country. You have breakout sessions for just about every one of them. So, how can we, enjoy talking to and getting the feedback from the people who we normally congregate with, but how do we break through that and help introduce other constituencies to our own, help to take our constituencies to others, and help us also understand that listening in a civic context doesn't always end with the result that you expect it to. Our systems and our policymaking and our public input processes are going to result in an outcome that is not your own. And that's the nature of it. We have to learn to compromise. We have to learn to meet each other in the middle. And if you're expecting a public input process to result in your ask equaling what you receive, then you're coming in with the wrong expectations. We have to be able to give of ourselves and be changed by the process.
Mm. And I'm going to leave you and have you be able to leave as well, because I know you have a Saha meeting. But there's a poet, David White, Irish, and he talks about how life is all a conversation. And so what you just pointed out is that coming together and discussing, we don't know what the outcome is going to be because we don't know what outcomes are conversations, right? It's a relationship. He talks about how an airplane and the air itself, both are in conversation. So if either one of those aren't talking or aren't conversing, so if there's no air flowing, the plane doesn't fly. If the plane stops, it drops, right? It needs both the air and the plane moving. And if you're riding in it, you count on that conversation. And so that's what today is about. And I want to thank you for opening and coming into this conversation. We've got to all learn how to talk to each other, clearly and frankly, hard on systems, soft on people. And so we're grateful for your leadership, Mayor. And we hope you have a good day. And thank your office staff for being so patient with us.
Well, thank you, Ann and everyone. I'm grateful for your leadership. And so have a wonderful day. I look forward to hearing more about the symposium, and let's all have a great 2022.